Hi, everybody, and here we are again with the ongoing series, fascinating series of the adventures of Dr. Douglas Gabriel and the interviews with an exorcist. And I've been pulled in by our ingenious producer, Tyler Gabriel, because I was there for a lot of it, and I can attest to the reality. Douglas, like myself, has many stories that when you tell them, well, people think you're just making it up. And so I'm here as a witness to this marvelous gentleman's adventures in high strangeness. Hello, Douglas.
Good day, John. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, except a mosquito got me right in the middle of my back.
Well, you see, it's that lawn work. You're just all the time out working your lawn. So you're just open for the attacks. Now, me, I only go out there 15 minutes a week and do my part. And then it takes me 15 days to recover. So today we're going to continue on with our discussions, which have been so serious. So I'm trying to lighten it up. So we're going to open up this talk looking at the words of Van Morrison's song, Dweller on the Threshold. Why? Because we've been talking about the Dweller on the Threshold. And I remember when this song first came out, it was one of the first songs that I really listened to of Van Morrison's, and after that he became my favorite artist. And a lot of his music's very spiritual. Matter of fact, listening to his music is a spiritual experience in some cases. But here you can tell he's a student of Alice Bailey because he's using certain phrases that only she uses. He's obviously a student of theosophy. He has no doubt read Zanoni, because the description he's giving here, some of this comes directly from Bulwer Lytton that John quoted last time. So there are some people who put the description of the dweller of the threshold or the guardian of the threshold into literature and some into music. So Van puts it into music. So I'm going to go over that. I sent you a copy of it, but I'm going to go line by line because I believe it's one of the most insightful things. Not only that, I can sing and dance to it. And the chorus is very good. So, you can really get into this song. That's okay. I'm joking there. But the point is that when you have such truth being communicated through art, you just got to love it, man. Matter of fact, if there was one person right now that I would want to interview that's still alive, it would be Van Morrison. And I'd want to ask him about some of the lyrics and some of his songs just to see why he couldn't take the next step with Rudolf Steiner. And I don't believe he has. And that's so evident, you see, because when you look across into the unseen world from this world, the world of the seen, the world of delusion, of illusion, the world that is colored by Lucifer and controlled by Ahriman, when you look into that unseen world, your eyes don't work anymore, your ears don't work, none of your senses work. Even the 12 senses that I've described previously, those only slightly work. The thing that works is a little bit of acknowledging when you can encounter consciousness. But even then, it's not going to be like any consciousness you've ever experienced. As we've described, going across the threshold, you can see Christ in the etheric, in his second coming. Christ's second coming first was as in a body. This one's in his etheric body, as a being that is using the etheric realm angelically. And we are looking through our angelic realm, our astral light, into that etheric realm so that we can see Christ manifest. And that, we talked last time about, that's a medical condition. A lot of people have had that experience, and then they have psychotic ambulisms, psychotic breakdown, become neurotic, psychotic, or a variety of other things, the Messiah complex, the Jerusalem syndrome, it's called. If you go to Jerusalem and all of a sudden you think you're Jesus, well, you're not alone. There's thousands of others who've had that experience, and they call it literally the Jerusalem syndrome. Or if you go to the apparitions of Mother Mary and you come back thinking you're Mother Mary or you're Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene is usually who people associate with because the Bible, the interpretation of the Bible is wrong. Mary Magdalene was not a sinful woman. But so if you're a sinful person, you identify with going to a vision of Mother Mary and you literally watched miracles happen right before your eyes, you may come back with an associative disorder where you associate with something so strongly that you become that as far as you're concerned. But that's the same thing that is done in spiritual practice. It's called deity worship. You get a deity in your mind, like Manjushri. You consider all of his spiritual weapons and his history and his nature, how he came to that, what his characteristics are, his virtues, and you meditate on it for years, saying a verse, that says something complimentary about Manjushri, the being of wisdom, which others might call Sophia, others might call the Kyriotades, the spirits of wisdom, so on and so forth. So you identify with this, and that's what you become. So what we want to point out is that, as we said before, if you want to go to the threshold, you better be ready for a few things. Either sleep, falling unconscious because you're just not awake enough to go across the threshold awake, or meeting the three beasts, the three monsters, which are who? You. That's your thinking, feeling, and willing that is completely bad and not allowed across. It's bad karma. It's luggage. They won't let it across. So you could either go to sleep, or you can get initiated and go across the threshold awake, or you can die. And if you're just going there over the night, you're going to meet the lesser guardian. And that lesser guardian is no longer the beings like the Sphinx for the Egypt, or like Cerberus for the Greeks, or Saint Michael for the Catholics. It's going to be whatever your religion is, whatever your archetypal cosmic divine symbols are for you that represent moral beings. That's what you're going to experience. So we're going to talk today, after we go over this song, Dweller on the Threshold, about the fact that throughout all my life, I saw what happened to people after they died. Not, of course, let me qualify that. You don't see it. You participate in it. And I thought everybody did, up until I was probably 12 years old, because I said I was a very slow developer. I didn't understand most of what I saw going on around me. I thought it was a bunch of nonsense. So we're going to talk about that and what happens. And we're going to give you the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts we can give, except for the wisdom of the cosmic Christ, the Sophia of Christos, is the greatest gift we can give you. But another one is to know what is beyond the threshold of death. And we're going to talk quite a bit about that today. So, John, are you ready? Van Morrison. I know you like Van the man.
Oh, yeah, Van the man.
Okay, here we go. I'm a dweller on the threshold, and I'm waiting at the door, and I'm standing in the darkness. I don't want to wait no more. That's the chorus. That's very obvious. This is someone who, they're dark and they want to turn to the light, right? Okay, so what do they have to do? Cross the threshold. I forgot to mention, when you said this, said a reference to this last time, I wanted to say that when I reached puberty, which was very late, strangely enough, I'm on the schedule that Steiner gives, which is like for, 100 years ago, when you actually reach puberty when you're 14. So right when I was 14, that's when I got together with Father William, and shortly thereafter he started training me, and I saw all this weird stuff. And so very frequently, especially for a short period of time, when I bled a lot, I would wake up falling to the bed or standing in my bed with my arms out like I'm on a crucifix, because I'm trying to emulate Christ. And here I am in a crucifixion, exactly as you described. Brilliant light on one side, living darkness on the other, ripping me into two. And it was like, oh, wow. I didn't sign up for this. When my dad told me I had to go with Father William, do what he said, I didn't know that this was going to happen. So it became a horrifying experience if you meet the threshold and you aren't truly prepared. And obviously, as a child, I wasn't prepared. So really, that is what the dweller on the threshold like. It's like having one foot in the spiritual world, one foot in the material world. And as I'll mention later today, when someone's about to die, it looks, I can see it. If somebody's going to die within 3 days and I'm looking at them, I can see they're going to die in 3 days, unless it's an accident, if they're old, because they're already exiting the body. You can see it. It's so very, very clear. They literally have stepped across the threshold. And in most cases, because their etheric body is now This is going to open a can of worms. The etheric body starts off very old. And when you die, if you've lived a long, good moral life, it's very young. And that's why old people act like children, because their etheric body is this childlike thing now. And so when you're looking at someone who's ready to die, they're like a child. You can't make them angry. If they're moral people, they're like in a spiritual condition that is like unto a child between the age of 1 to 3, when the Christ sheath encircles them and gives them the ability to stand upright, speak, and think. But when you're dying, Christ is there too. He's the lesser guardian for sleep, and he's the greater guardian for death. So when we're talking about the guardian, John has rightly framed it to point out that this is very serious. This is about your I am. When you go into the spiritual world, your I am is that lantern. And where are you going? To your mansion that you created, which is your future physical body of an angel. And that's what you're creating right now. And if you're not, well, then you're not going to have one when you get there. You're going to be so disappointed. And we're going to talk about that because it's very definitive after you die that these things are no joke. But the problem is, after you die, you don't have willpower in the spiritual world. You're like in receiving mode. You're not in active mode. You don't get to do anything except reap what you have sown. And that's why it's either hell or heaven. So when we talk about the threshold, every night, meeting this dweller on the threshold, you can do that. And if you do it, it's a warm-up for death. So when you die and you go before Christ, the Lord of Karma, the greater guardian, you can say every night, lesser guardian, and now greater guardian Christ, Lord of Karma, I did my review of the day. I examined my conscience. I got right with the world. If I needed to, I didn't go to sleep until I wrote a letter to someone apologizing or whatever it would take. And I did my prayers every night. And I loved people. I loved my family. I loved well, you could call it your folk, your nation, your religion, and especially the solar being Christ. So those are the things that are going to keep you alive now, going across the threshold. Alive is in terms of that you are the light over there that can do something instead of just go into pure darkness, which is what most materialists can't cross the threshold. They won't look at the threshold. They're scared of death. But even if they did, what would they see over there? Nothing. Now, they could take an acid trip or take some ayahuasca or DMT or something and go over there for a minute, but they won't remember anything, and they won't be able to have any way to, they don't have a topology of the spiritual world, so it won't mean anything to them.
And it won't be the same because your own soul content will be the artist that paints the images that you see, and you'll see things coming at you, but they're not coming at you. They're coming from you. And so you could look at other people and think that they're demons, but it's your demons that are inhabiting that vision, so that it's a little bit confusing to many people.
Well, as we've often said, it's upside down, backwards, and inside out. And I've been studying Steiner's astronomy now, and man, does he ever get into this concept that everything in the universe comes and is and can be found in the principles in the human body, because it's the temple of the universe. It's the temple of wisdom. And this inversion, that inside out thing, man, if you can't comprehend going inside out, you're just not going to get to the third layer, which is there's the astral, etheric, and physical. So the astral is the first, the etheric's the second, the physical is the third. And there's many names for it, many descriptions. But basically, we'll find it here in this poem or song poem or whatever you call these lyrics that he has given us. And so we're talking about the dweller in the threshold, and we're at the door. Okay. So the first line is, I have seen without perceiving. And what do you think about that, John?
Well, when you get into some of these ideas, you see that there's the concept of Maya, or the illusion. And Rudolf Steiner says in the lecture on Kyrios. Our modern way of expressing ourselves is slovenly and banal. Thus, when a human being is standing in front of us, we say, "Here's a man." Similarly, when there are two or three. But what is there in front of us is only Maya. If we see a being with two legs and a human face, the only way of expressing what we see in our modern language is to say that is a man. But what does occultism take this man to be? In the form in which he stands before us, he is nothing but Maya, approximately as real as a rainbow in the sky. A rainbow is a reality only so long as the necessary conditions of rain and sunshine are present. As soon as the relation between sunshine and rain changes, the rainbow vanishes. It's exactly the same in the case of a man. He is only a confluence of forces of the macrocosm. We must look for forces in the heavens in the macrocosm. For the occultist, what we assume on earth to be a man is simply nothingness. The truth is that forces are streaming from above downwards and from below upwards, and they intersect. Just as a particular combination of rain and sun produces a rainbow, so do forces streaming together from above and below out of the macrocosm create a phenomenon, an illusory image, which we take to be a man. But the man we see as before us is really nothing but Maya, an illusion. Where we think we see a man, there are intersecting cosmic forces. You must take this quite seriously. The man, as he stands before us, is merely a shadow of many forces. But the being who manifests in the man may well be at a different place altogether from the point where the man with his two legs is standing. Now, that's obviously quite quixotic, but it's in reference to Jesus Christ. And so that there's a deep, deep mystery there. And the understanding of that concept of Kyrios. And in this particular lecture, Rudolf Steiner is always saying that of the way in which the scripture is translated doesn't reveal the deeper meanings within the scripture. But if you look into some of the words, even just a couple of words can totally transform your understanding. So for instance, when they say messenger, well, that means angel, clearly. You know, when they say Kyrios, Kyrios means Lord. And that's in reference to that I am the I am, the higher ego that we receive from Christ. Now, if you understand these things in light of occultism or theosophy or spiritual science, then you come to understand that we receive the principle of kama manas back in the Lemurian period that preceded Atlantis. And so that's that impulse that we received through the agency of Jehovah Elohim and the moon, when the moon separated from the earth. And so you have the story of Adam and Eve, preceded by, of course, the story that took place in the supersensible world with the ties into everybody's going on about the Nephilim and all that. But if you don't study Rudolf Steiner, you're not going to get a clear conception. So when we have this idea of kama manas, that's the desiring mind that gives you the desire to reincarnate, okay? But that becomes redeemed through Christ, see? And so if you try and revert back to the Old Testament way of looking at things, you miss out on that principle of love. And that's the key principle that's present a little bit in the book of Hosea, you know, but you don't have a great emphasis on love. It's all familial relationships. That's the grouping that expresses that principle, but that's an expression of that kama manas element, the desiring mind. And that when you get to Christ coming into earth evolution, then you have something that was a template, like Douglas was referring to earlier, with that whole idea of the contribution of the Buddhist tradition, of the Buddha himself, of bringing that idea of love and compassion into the earthly realm. And then you see that taken up in like in the Gospel of Luke, for example. So that you have this idea that you have wisdom and love. And so you have that transition from the Mars period of Earth evolution that leads up to the incarnation of Christ. And that ties into that wisdom realm. But that realm of Mars was conquered by the Buddha. The Mars chakra is the throat chakra, the 16-petal lotus of the Eightfold Path. And so you have it, but he doesn't have the content, in 6 centuries BC to be able to solve the riddles of Christ. It's too early. And so if you're studying Buddhism that just pertains to those early scriptures, you don't have all the pieces you need to be able to sort it out. And Rudolf Steiner's adamant about that. And he says, so you think Buddha hasn't evolved since the 6th century BC? And so what is that? I mean, the whole idea that wisdom without love can be ruthless. And so it's that element of love entering into the entelechy that is a human being that provides that path into the future, to the Mercury half of evolution. So we move from the Mars half to the Mercury half.
I have seen without perceiving. So that is basically that you have to have supersensible organs or you can't see past the dweller of the threshold. I've been another man. You addressed that, John. We have the Saturn man in us, the ancient Saturn man, ancient sun, ancient moon. We have different beings in us, the mineral, the plant, the animal, these kingdoms. And so that's what Van Morrison's talking about here. Let me pierce the realm of glamour. That shows that he's a follower of Alice Bailey. Alice Bailey loved to use the word glamour and point out that that's what happens with the astral body, is they get caught up in glamour. And why are you trying to get across the threshold? Fran says, so I know just what I am. And you don't know what you are. You don't know your physical, your etheric, your astral, your spirit self, your life spirit, your spirit human being. You don't know the 3 parts of your soul. Why? Because you were never taught them. So when you get to the threshold, you have to be educated. You have to find out who you actually are, who the I am in you is. And then he says, I feel the angel of the presence. That's your guardian angel who is right there with you as you're crossing. And the angel of the presence can also be a reference to the guardian, lesser guardian, the greater guardian himself, who is now Christ. In the mighty crystal fire, that's the Imperium is a crystal fire, according to the Greeks. And I think that's where he gets that phrase. Lift me up, consume my darkness. Yeah. When you cross the threshold, I oftentimes refer to going up or going out, but it isn't necessarily that. And it isn't that at all once you get to a true spiritual scientific astronomy. But the point is that it feels like you're being lifted up and that your darkness is being consumed. It's being consumed by what? That fire that he just talked about. And he says, let me travel even higher, because we're going to talk about that now. There are many levels of heaven. There are 7 levels you'll go through after you die. And the higher levels are the higher levels of heaven. And basically, it says, let me go down to the water. That's the water John just referred to, crossing the river Styx, and drown and let the great illusion drown. So that's that illusion that also is being referred to, the illusion that Lucifer has created. And this is the problem. On this side, Lucifer creates what we see. And because we are convinced that what we see is real, instead of looking with eyes, supersensible eyes that can see beyond the physical to see what is behind the physical, we are convinced by Lucifer that it's all real, and it's a big delusion. And we have to drown that illusion in the water of Styx. In other words, what is the river Styx? It's the threshold. And Cerberus is, of course, the 3 parts of yourself that aren't ready to go across the threshold. What did Hercules do? He tamed Cerberus and brought him back up to the surface. So there are many people who've gone into the underworld, crossed, and come across back. But when you die in Greek times, they would put a coin in your mouth. And if they did not put a certain type of coin in your mouth, you're not going to get across the river. What is that coin? That coin really, literally, Steiner talks about it being the metal. It is the morality that you've developed. in the physical world through your physical body. In other words, spirit has come into the physical through your body, and if it can transform the mineral world into living minerals, ionized minerals, those minerals are what can get you across the river Styx, get you over the threshold. So let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about, why would you want to go across the threshold? Who wants to go across the threshold? I mean, now that we have explained it so thoroughly, if you read Zidoni, if you read what Franz Hartmann says about it, or anybody else says about the threshold, it doesn't sound like a place you'd want to go. What Van Morrison just told us, really? You want to cross the burning ground? You want to go down to the river? You want to drown your illusions? We live by our illusions. You want to drown your illusions? Then throw your phone in the river. Throw your phone in the river. See, throw your computer in the river. See how that goes for you. Because to cross that river, you have to let go of everything physical. And for most people, they would say that religion was created as a panacea to allay the fears of death that people have. And so they made up fairy tales about what would happen after death, and fairy tales about who you'd meet after death, and about who it was that created this big mess that we were born into. So it's all fairy tales, according to some people. The materialist thinks that's complete nonsense. After they die, they're going to a cold, dead, dark, lonely grave. And Rudolf Steiner points out that that is exactly where they go. Because after you cross the threshold, if you don't have a light, like John pointed out, you don't have the lantern, you can't see anything, and you're alone. And since you didn't build your house, you have nowhere to stay. You have nowhere to go. And just as John pointed out, when you have a desire, it isn't that you go to it, it comes to you. Oh, so if you have a lot of bad desires, what's going to happen to you after you die? I'm sorry, you're going to stay in the same realm you're in now. We interpenetrate the realms of the hungry ghosts of the hell realm between here and the moon. So when you die, for 3 days, your etheric body is severed. At night, when you go to sleep, it isn't severed. The astral body still has a tenuous connection to the etheric body. And I'm going to go ahead and stick this in. This is a segue here. For the high, deep anthroposophist, yes, I understand that we do not go into these spheres physically and go all the way out to the realm of Saturn during sleep at night. We go into our etheric body, which has a perfect miniature copy of it, but it is, in fact, an interactive copy, just in case you thought I didn't know that. So at night, Rudolf Steiner says 1,000 times something that doesn't sound like that. He says that the ego, the I am, and the astral body separates from the etheric and the physical. Physical and etheric stay in bed and you sleep. Your etheric body renews your physical body. And that's why your etheric body is so old and powerful and wise when you're young, because that's when it's the strongest. What you do as a growing baby is never replicated in your life again. It's 100 times more than what you produce as someone my age, what a 2-year-old produces in terms of their etheric energy. So at night, it looks as if you can go into these spheres, the spheres between here and the moon. Everything that the moon inscribes is the sphere of the earth. It's a community, sphere of the moon. It's a community. So between here and the moon, the 28.25 days that it takes to go through a moon cycle are different levels. And those levels can be called the levels of hungry ghost, the level of wish and desire, or it could also be called the levels of love and goodness and virtue and mercy and grace. So it depends, but they're interpenetrating one another. Now, you've heard me say, some people are being pulled into subnature, into the 8th sphere. That is literally below this earth that we walk on. And so when I would see angels, they were always in groups. I can't say I've ever seen an angel alone except my own guardian angel. Every other time, they're hanging out in the band. They're playing the music, they're singing the songs, and they're dancing, and they're having a really good time. And you look up to them, but they're right there. They're not like way up in heaven. No, they're right there. You could touch them if you reached out, and they don't even notice you because they're happening in the same exact area that we are. Same as hell, same as heaven, and that's the realm between here and the moon.
Yes, the choir of angels. You see frequent reference to the choir of angels. Well, why is that? Well, that's because they are literally a choir. they're singing the music of the spheres. And you have in the story, in the Gospel of Luke, the choir of angels coming with the Bodhisattva transformed into the Buddha, right? And he's in that Nirmanakaya form with the angels singing that hallelujah. I mean, that's a really radical departure from Christian eschatology to say that. And so the further you look at that, the closer you come to the truth of the statement. And again, in understanding anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner would be disappointed if you just believed him. What he wants you to do is, out of your own free will and accord, live with these ideas and see if they prove true. And so, since we're in pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful, at least we like to think that's what we're doing here. And when you get into the idea of the angel of the presence, that brings to mind its most specific reference in the body of literatures in the apocryphal book of Tobit. And it's interesting because in the book of Tobit, you have quite a story in which, he wishes to marry Sarah, okay, and the beautiful Sarah. But the demon, the king of demons, Asmodeus, okay, the demon of lust, he has killed her previous 7 suitors, right? So it's kind of a precarious thing to be striving for, but Tobit strives nonetheless, and through the help of Raphael, which is the archangel of healing, of Mercury, right? He's given the formula that he can take and burn the heart and the liver, and that what that will do is create something that will take away that curse of Asmodeus and get him to run away. And so he does that, and it works, and he ends up marrying Sarah. But it says here, Tobias is sent to retrieve 10 silver talents that Tobit once left in Rages, a town in Medea. Guided and aided by the archangel Raphael, he arrives in Ecbatana, where he meets Sarah. A demon named Asmodeus has fallen in love with her and kills anyone she intends to marry. He did that 7 times already. But with the aid of Raphael, the demon is exorcised, and Tobias and Sarah marry, after which they return to Nineveh, where Tobit is cured of his blindness. And so you have this whole idea, again, that cured of his blindness. So he loses that realm of darkness, and he enters into the realm of light through being able to come into a harmonious relationship with Sarah. I mean, that's a deep, deep mystery, because when you get that idea of that the Kamamanas was introduced in the story of the Garden of Eden, that it's through being able to come into a harmonious relationship with that impulse through the added addition of love, that you have that idea of fidelity, and that the key here is fidelity. The way you conquer the demon of love, or lust, rather, the shadow image, and that's something that's being so destroyed today. They want to destroy that. That's Asmodeus. There's a statue of Asmodeus in Rennes-le-Château that was destroyed by vandals recently. But he's this red, fiery demon with clawed hands and feet. And that's the lust element of the dweller on the threshold, and that has to be conquered. And it can't be done like if you go in the book of Revelation, where they have the Nicolaitans, and he talks about how he hates the Nicolaitans. Well, Nicholas, he had this beautiful wife, and he wanted to be pure, so he sent her away to just frolic around with other men. No, that's not harmonious fidelity. And so that's the world in which we're living is a world in which they are encouraging people to not have that fidelity.
Yes, I wrote a play with my children in Waldorf school about Tobit because it's in the Roman Catholic Bible, but it's not in the Standard Bible, and it's apocryphal. But what is it telling us? It's telling us about initiation. That was an initiation. That's the reason he had to go down to the water, catch the fish, take the liver of the fish, and put it on his father's eyes, and it healed his father's eyes of blindness that were caused by sparrows who had defecated in his eyes when he was out burying the Jews when he was under command of death if they did. His father did that. And then his father said, look, this debt is owed to me. So for you to pay your debt for initiation, all you have to do is go wrestle with 7 demons. That's all. And once you've done that and you marry a demon bride and you don't die and you heal me of blindness, in other words, I'll see, how does Van Morrison say it? I wish I could say it so simply. I have seen without perceiving. That's the healed eyes of his father. And what did he bring back? He brought back all the herds of animals and his inheritance and the debt and much more. And everybody loved Tobit. And his wife was faithful. Sarah was faithful to him. So it's a perfect example of taming one of the 3 beasts. That would be the beast of the will, which is usually embodied through sex and violence. And so you have to face these things. And who's going to help you with the sex and violence? Well, in this story, it's the Archangel Raphael. In other stories, it'll be the Archangel Michael, the Archangel Gabriel, Uriel, or Christ or Sophia can help you to get across this threshold and then lead you, because it was the companion, because Tobit didn't know that his companion was an archangel. He just said, let's go down to the river, catch a fish for dinner. Oh, okay. It just happens to be a huge fish and happens its liver can heal his dad's eyes. So, but Raphael is the archangel of healing. So each of those represent the physical, etheric, astral, and ego that you have to deal with. But the ego is your light. It's that lantern that you're going to carry with you. And it tries to keep together the 3 other parts that go in different directions all the time, like kittens. And it's very, very difficult to cross the threshold. So after you die, if you cross the threshold now through initiation or through being awake in your dreams, in your sleep, it's very difficult because you have to learn that language of spirit. You have to learn to see things upside down, backwards, and inside out, as well as in everything that you've ever perceived or known or built any of your concepts on. Well, just throw that away. Those don't work there. But once you get the language down, and for instance, I was able to see that when my grandparents died, I followed them. Because why? After you die for 3 days, your etheric body dissolves and goes back into the cosmic etheric around the earth, the realm of Shambhala, the realm of spiritual economy. But if you're a highly developed being, it sticks around. It's no longer you, but your etheric body's been perfected and it's left there as a template that can be multiplied an infinite amount of times for other people who wish to tap into it. So that's left there. For the rest of us, it dissolves. But then you have your astral body, your body of desires. That's called the realm between here and the moon, the realm of the angels, and that's called Kama Loka. In other words, what John was talking about, Kama, desire, and Loka, the place of desire. But if you're desireless, guess what happens? You go right on up. You go up the ladder of Jacob. You go up the 28 and a quarter steps to the moon. And then you are talking to angels. Because why? Your desire is the same as theirs. Divine desire. The desire of the spiritual plan of humanity turning into angels. And so you can go one way or the other. And after you die, unfortunately, it's completely different than people think. But a lot of the elements, if you compacted them into a mush of word salad, it would be what you actually experience. And this is exactly what you experience. Depending upon, you can get this out of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, or you can get it from Rudolf Steiner's book called Life Between Death and Rebirth. I call that series of lectures the Western Book of the Dead, the Christian Book of the Dead. And you should read it to those who die. So when you die, you should just be laid out on a slab with lots of candles and flowers in the room, and people should read to you from whatever your book of the dead is to remind you of the signposts you're going to see, what it is and where you are. And if you don't have that, then you're at a loss. The Tibetans would also describe that as the bardo in their Tibetan Book of the Dead. You can study that. But Steiner's view is by far the best, and he explains it not in terms of angels and the nine hierarchy, which I'm going to also add, but he describes it in ways that you can directly experience through your soul to develop spiritual qualities. So your etheric body, this magic body that we talk about, where Christ is appearing in his second coming, it dissolves into the earth. Your astral body keeps you bound between the earth and the moon based upon your desires. If you have a bunch of seven deadly sin desires, that's where you're staying. And you're going to be alone, and you're going to be in darkness because you have no morality to light your way, and you have no friends because of what you've done with your seven deadly sins. So you're alone and you're in the dark, and you're going to reincarnate quick, but you'll have no moral force. And so you will be in a deformed human body or something less than a human body. That's your fate. That's what you've chosen. It's just like I always say, there's no such thing as possession without the person who is possessed having a big part in it. Well, you're not going to go to hell this is like a hell realm. You're not going to go there unless that's the home you've been building for yourself. It's very clear. And then between the realm of moon and Venus, if you can imagine this, and it is not this way, I'll be talking about this soon, the new view showing the sun moving towards Vega, and the Earth and the inner planets, Venus and Mercury, and then the outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, following behind the sun in kind of a corkscrew that creates a limnoscate. That's what Steiner says. That's what they have now been able to demonstrate with high-powered computers. That is the true motion of the Earth. But if you're going to look at this in this way, it's the Earth is in the middle, and then there's the moon, like an onion layer around it, and then there's Venus, and then there's Mercury, and then there's the sun, and you stay in that realm 3 times as long. Then there's Mars and Jupiter and Saturn, and then you stop, you look at the stars, you turn around and you come back through those same realms, building your body. And on the way out, you give to those planetary communities the exact substance that they use for their living. In other words, between here and the moon, what do they live on? Desires, good and bad. Between the moon and Venus, what do they live on? The moral actions you've had with your family and the people that you know, the most common reactions that you've had, held in your solar plexus chakra, by the way. And then between Venus and Mercury, what are you going to give to those beings, and what are they going to give to you? You're going to give to them what you had as your feeling for the divine, for religion, for wonder, awe, reverence, and all that you had, that you digested every night in your sleep. I'll come back to that. Every night in your sleep, you digest this stuff, you give it to these beings as their food, and at night, they give you a gift back. So in the morning, you wake up refreshed. But when you die, it's one way. It's a one-way ticket. You're going out, then you're coming back. So between Venus and Mercury, what do we have? We have the realm of religious devotion. And then when you get to the realm of the sun, that is going to be directly related to how you relate to the solar logos, the being of the sun, that you're the template of that being. You are a 3D holographic representation of Christ, of the second logos, of the solar being. So you have to stay there 3 times as long, because has everything to do with the development of your I am. So if you listen carefully, you would have heard between here and the moon are angels. Between the moon and Venus are archangels. Between Venus and Mercury are archai. And when you get to the sun, that's the Elohim. 3 times you stay there 3 times as long. And then after that, it's a whole different story. After that, it's completely different. And if I explain it to you in Steiner's terms, it will sound crazy. But that's what this is all about, craziness, right? High, weird, unique, crazy, paradoxical logic. So There you are. You're going through these spheres between here and the moon. Everyone knows that's where the angels are, the archangels, the archai, the Elohim. And then you get to the realm of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, and you come to the realm of the dunamis, the Karyotetes, and the thrones, the beings of motion, the beings of wisdom, and the beings of willpower. And in that realm, you're led by a special being. I'm not even going to name that being. I'll let you study the thing below, which is we provided for you not only Van Morrison's Words to a Song, but also an article on what happens to you after you die. So you won't be afraid. And so that if you're not afraid, guess what? You can start working on your spiritual mansion now. If you don't have doubt, if you don't have hatred and fear, you can start working on that now. And then when you get there, guess what? You're going home. So for some people, going to heaven is going home. For some people, it's going to hell. Okay. So in those realms, you're guided by another being from the realm of the sun, and you experience then, as John pointed out, the harmony of the spheres. Well, what is that? That's the dominions, the beings of motion. They're the ones who control and spin the spheres, rotate the spheres, and keep them all in order. And then what do you hear in the realm of Jupiter? You hear the singing of the choir of angels, exactly as we just made reference to. And why? Because they add to that music, because the music, the harmony of the spheres can, if you're not spiritual, sound like crazy, and it overwhelm you and it'll rip you to pieces. But if you're spiritual, it sounds like an announcement that Christ is coming. It's the same thing that you experience when you see Christ in the etheric. You see the light, and then you hear the sound that announces him, and then you hear the word, the creative word, the word of life. And that's the third thing you hear in Saturn, is the word of life. And the word of life, what does it speak? It speaks you. It says exactly who you have been, and who you have been in those realms of the moon, Venus, Mercury, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, where you have given back to those spiritual communities what you have done here on earth as your gifts to them. Once you turn around on Saturn and you go back to those realms, they use those exact gifts. They give you their gift to you as a response to build your new body. Materialists never get beyond the moon, so their bodies in their next incarnation are going to look like animals and horrible things. But people who make it all the way out to the realm of Saturn, and they call that the sun at midnight, stand on the rings of Saturn and look to the stars and say, I understand now. And that's why they say you get to know everything once you go to heaven. Yeah, if you're awake that long. So if you can stay awake all that long, you're standing on the rings of Saturn, you're looking out to the stars and you're going, yeah, I'm speaking to you, the creative word that I did, anything eternal, anything loving and moral that I did on the earth, to the stars. Now, would you please give me some love back? And that's literally what they do. From the stars comes your physical body for now and your next incarnations and future incarnations, even on futures, when you're an angel, when you're an archangel, that comes from the stars. And as you're returning back, again, you don't have any willpower. All of this is happening to you. Now, here's one good thing to remember. When you pray for someone who's dead, you have willpower. You directly connect to them. The more love you send them and the higher moral stature you have, the more you give them food that they can then give to those beings in those spiritual communities that can keep your light bright and you surrounded by other beings. Otherwise, you are in darkness and you are alone and you don't go out very far and you come back too quick and you're locked up into materialism, into the eighth sphere. And again, literally in the future, we're going to be talking about this also, but you turn into what it is that you have or have not done, good or bad. And so there are going to be, like right now, there are people who are like animals. They're not like animals. They are animals. They are devolving. And that will happen more and more. Well, if that's happening in the spiritual world, then you have nothing to give the spiritual world. And so the spiritual world has nothing to give you. So you're just stuck with whatever you can get, whether it be a slug in the mud of the slime of the eighth sphere of future Jupiter, or a locust person, or a reptilian, or a person, all these different things. Those are all happening right now. And as we're going through those spheres, remember, there are humans in those spheres, not just hierarchical beings. Rudolf Steiner says there are beings who are acting out their human stage on all the planets right now, concurrently. So as we're going through these 7 levels of heaven, and we are giving back to them, we're giving to them the gifts that we can give, just like when you're doing Holy Communion, you're supposed to make an offering before you get the good food of the Holy Eucharist. You have to make an offering. So you make this offering to the spiritual world, and then they give back to you what you need to build your next life in your next incarnation. So if you know that, and by the way, I've traveled with people through this, because in this realm, you go through things 1/3, 3 times as fast. But what happens 1/3 of the time while you're on the earth? You're asleep. So Rudolf Steiner literally says, all that you actually carry from one life to the next is what you do during your sleep. It doesn't matter whether you dream. You digest your thinking, feeling, and willing. And then when you die, because there's no sleeping, you go through it 3 times as fast. So my brother, who died when he was 21, he spent 7 years in that. So if in those last 7 years he was with me, I can go to those moments during his life that he was with me in my dream, or if I'm awake in initiatory consciousness, an awake kind of trance, as John pointed out last time, theta brainwave. I can participate with my brother, and if he did me wrong, I can forgive him. And that changes his entire experience in heaven. And that's what purgatory is about. That's why you can pray for people and they don't stay so long in hell. That's what Rudolf Steiner meant when he said, we should open no meeting without thanking the dead. Everything we do, we should first thank the dead, because without them, we couldn't have anything, and we wouldn't have a world even to exist in. So we need to be in a living relationship with the dead. And as a clairvoyant, I was asked, I'm not even going to come up with a number because I can't, to go across the threshold, like those crazy people I was with who used a Ouija board to go across the threshold and it turned out bad. I was asked to go across the threshold and communicate with people who had died. Because I know this, I could track exactly where they're at, except for the fact that if someone had a traumatic accidental death at an early age, they sometimes stay asleep for a while. And then I could go and check and they're still asleep. So I'd wait till they woke up. And then I would go and I would talk with them in my dreams through exomatosis and bring back messages. But I could only bring back, because they're not active, I could only bring back their unresolved wishes and desires that were so powerful they were imprinted into their astral shell. And then I could read that. And sometimes literally it was the money's underneath the counter, literally. And at other times, the money's in the gray money box under the tree where we always put it. Or because people die accidentally and their spouses know they have a message, and they're like, they come to me and say, I know there's a message for me from my husband. I'm looking and going, I think you really do know. So I'll give it a go. But as I always did, if I couldn't help them, that was it. I couldn't help them. Didn't ever charge anybody anything unless I could help them. So I could follow people. I could follow my own relatives, my own parents into that realm. So I can tell you for a direct fact that that realm exists. I have experienced it. I don't know if it'd be an exaggeration to say 10,000 times, but thousands and thousands of times. And when I go into graveyards, I can see people who are stuck. I can see people who are in haunted houses that are stuck. I can see their shells. I can help their shells transition. If they're stuck in their etheric body, then I can direct their etheric body one way or the other. But anybody can do that. It's just simply love. If you have somebody who you knew who died, how many people get a visitation from those they love when they die? Jillions of people.
Yeah, you triggered a funny story, and we sometimes need a little bit of comic relief because we don't want to get too heavy, because this is actually fun, although it's not entertainment. But I was looking for a place to move in Birmingham, and it's down by the brook. I used to live by the brook, and there, but you go up the road and there's this cemetery, and there was this home, but the address was 666, and I thought, oh well, this is great. I at least got to check it out. So I go in, and as it was back in the 70s, people started to get artsy with their decor. And I go into this little house, right next to the cemetery. And in the living room is a big brown arrow painted on the wall pointing down. And I thought, I don't think so. But thank you very much for showing. So we all make choices in life, and it goes back. It reminds me of Poltergeist, you know, and that whole thing with the old man with the scraggly hair. That was the guy who was the heir of the shoe fortune, and he came out of Living Theater in Europe, where my good friend Cal Barber was part of, and in Fellini movies and all that kind of stuff. But the best shoes fortune, and so when you look at these movies, a lot of them, partly because the people that wrote the stories had the good fortune to meet Douglas, and he was able to influence them in structuring the plot lines for the scripts. But there's this understanding that comes when you have that wonder, awe, and reverence towards other individuals that you meet, towards your destiny in life, that is transformative in the way it works out. And so that's basically what we're trying to work on here, is that wonder, awe, and reverence. Is that it could be those things that you don't know, and that they would put you in a state of awe, that it's so profound that it lifts you up, and that makes you reverent. And I want to thank everybody for showing that. Oh, you have one more.
Yeah,
you want to continue?
You reminded me of something I wanted to say.
Okay.
If you want to see what this really feels like for someone like myself, or if you think you're having experiences like this, get the movie The Sixth Sense. That is accurate. I don't know who they talk to, but I've said this from the first time. I don't know who they talk to, but man, they talk to someone who really does have the real experience. And that one wasn't me. And then there's the Robin Williams did one. What was it called? It was about going to heaven and meeting his son in heaven. Something about, I can't remember, something beautiful. But it is probably the best depiction that I've seen of what you go through. And Robin Williams has this guide. He goes to heaven. He dies. He goes to heaven. And then there's a few others that every once in a while, they really do talk to somebody who has had these experiences, who either has natural clairvoyance or is clairvoyant to some degree, and they get some of it right. And as people keep asking me, when someone dies, what does that look like? It looks exactly like what they show when a bad person died in The Sixth Sense. You see these black kind of shadows that you can't focus on, all swarming around them towards their feet and up towards their waist, and they're eating them alive. And I've been at the death of many, many people, because when I worked in the hospital, we were there, and I mentioned this last time. Plus, I've had this very strange occurrence of being at many a car wreck where people literally died while I was, giving them my no longer priestly last rites. And many times these people were literally conscious right to the second that they died, and then they died literally in my arms. And so I've had this unfortunate curse that I have seen this so many times I can't begin to tell you. And if you go out through the feet, then you're going down, and if you go out through the head, you're going up. And when you go up, there's all these light beings that it's like they're being, like John was describing, this thing coming down. Well, it comes down, but it also pulls you up at the same time. And then the thing that comes up from the bottom that swirls up like a vortex, these vortexes meet in your heart, that's true too. And for the demons, they do that. They pull you down, and you can literally see this. And why? Because their etheric body is instantaneously starting to dissolve, and it's going back to where it has its resonance. And with some, it's supernatural, and with some, it's supernatural.
Well, you can look at the images of the Ahrimanic demons that Rudolf Steiner represented with the corkscrew tails on them. Yes. And that's pointing to it in ancient Egypt. They have what's called Apep, and it's a snake. It's a serpent. Apophis is the Greek form of the name, but he's the serpent of chaos. And so you see that Sekhmet or Bastet, and it's the cat deity that is related to as an eye of Ra, and is a wrathful aspect of divine retribution. Takes the knife and slices the serpent of chaos into pieces, so that there's that whole idea of disassembling and the falling to pieces. And that's something that is not a pleasant experience if you don't have a light to lift you out of that shadowy existence.
Well, the Tibetans chop up your body and they put it up for the vultures because they believe that these vultures fly into the higher heavens and carry you up there. So they are rejoicing as they're chopping you up. And they've been doing this, for 10,000 years. So, John, we're going to end now, but I think that we should again dwell a little bit more on this next time, because seeing that it is the #1 fear of people, death, I think we should attempt to help mitigate that fear a little bit more next time we speak.
Absolutely. And I think we'll continue dwelling on the threshold here with Dr. Douglas Gabriel and our miraculous producer, Tyler Gabriel, who helped to, or really dreamt this up. And so with that, I want to thank you very much here from the Motor City on planet Earth.